Alright, hello everyone and welcome. This is the InDesign tutorial. I'm just going to show you guys how to use InDesign to come up with a board layout, and show you an example and some of the basic principles of layouts. And I think I'm going to divide this tutorial into three parts. The first one being just the basics. So we'll talk about like the toolbars, how InDesign's set up, the layers, the tools we'll be using, and master pages. And then the second tutorial will be about document setup and placing information on there, so drawings and renders, etc. And then the last tutorial will probably be pretty quick, and that'll go over like how to annotate your drawings in InDesign with text. Yeah, lines and annotations, leaders, stuff like that. So this should be pretty quick. InDesign's pretty straightforward program, pretty easy to use and user-friendly, and some of the tools and things that you learned in Photoshop also carry over into this software as well. And also some of the tools and things that you do in InDesign here also carry over into other Adobe products like Premiere Pro and Illustrator, so you guys can more easily teach yourself how to use those programs if in the future if you need to do so. Okay, so just getting started here. This is InDesign. This is the interface that opens up when you first open the program. Again, you might recognize this. It's sort of like Photoshop. You have the recent files menu, so I can see all of the recent files that I've opened in InDesign here and made changes to, and I can just open those very easily from this menu if I need to. So you guys probably won't have this because you probably don't have any InDesign files on your computer right now, but maybe you do and you might see them up in here. If you don't know how to open InDesign, if you just go to your start menu, and you'll probably see the pink icon that says ID here for InDesign. You can also access it from the Creative Cloud menu here, and under apps you can see InDesign is right here. We can open it from there as well. So the first thing you want to do when you open InDesign is, of course, we're going to open a new document. So you're going to go up here to File, and you're going to go to New. You can see you have a couple of options here. You have Document, which is what we're using, Book and Library. These two we're not going to use whatsoever. If you want to learn more about those, you can do so, but I'm not going to go over them because we're not going to use them. So, and we're going to go to Document here. So click on that guy. It's going to bring up this new document menu, and you can see here there's a series of various sizes. These are recent sizes that I've used, but what we're going to do is come over here to the right side of this menu, and you can see here that, you know, just like printing options, we have orientation, width and height, number of pages, the start number, number of columns. We can adjust the margin size here. You'll notice that everything is in P0 right now, the unit P0, and this unit is picas, and we can see that here under units it says picas, and this is just a digital media sort of unit, and we're not going to be using that. We want inches, right, because we print our paper in inches, we measure it in inches, so we're going to change our unit to inches. If you wanted to, you can use unit calculators to also change picas to inches if for some reason you wanted to do that. But we're going to change our units to inches. You can see here that now all of these options have changed to inches, our width, height, gutter, margins, etc. And so for the width and height, you will specify whatever your width and height of the page is going to be. Right now I have mine set to 24-inch width by 36-inch height. which is a portrait-oriented sheet. And this is a pretty typical size. I'm sure that we will give you a size on an assignment sheet, in which case you will punch those numbers into here. And the same for pages as well. If you're doing a board layout, just a single board, you might only have one page. If you have multiple boards or a portfolio that you're working on, obviously your page number will be different. Here I'm going to set 4, so we can go over, or I can discuss some items that involve multiple pages. The start number we're just going to leave as 1, and that just specifies that the first page is number 1, so obviously that's what we want. Columns you don't need to worry about. Margins, you can change these if you like. 1/2 inch is pretty standard, and we're going to stick with that. So something like this is what you should have. You can also name your document here, so I'm going to do that. Let's see, we're in 06, I believe. Okay, so something like that. And once we have that all typed in, oh, and this, I forgot to mention, this facing pages option is going to allow you to have book spreads. So when you open up a book, like you're reading a book, you have a page on the left side and a page on the right side. And in layout terms, this is called a spread, 2 pages put together. So facing pages is going to give us a spread, or a spread layout. And I'm actually going to uncheck that this time. If you're working on a portfolio, this might come in handy. Maybe you have things that sort of carry over sort of the spine of the book from the left page onto the right page, and this allows you to do stuff like that. For board layouts, typically you want to have that unchecked, but again, it depends on what you're doing. So I'm going to uncheck that, and we're going to go ahead and hit create here. So this is the working space in InDesign, and what you can see here in the middle is our page, 24 by 36. You can see this ruler up here is also telling me that 0 to 24 width, and then this ruler on the left side here, 0 to 36, shows us the page height. And you can see there's this white sort of box that's around the page here. And this is our sort of work canvas. Everything outside of that is just empty space. And then of course our page is outlined here in black with the margins in purple. And you can see if I zoom out, here are the 4 pages that I created, and I can zoom into those and work on them individually. So other things that you'll notice here, like in Photoshop, we have a toolbar on the left hand side. We have sort of this more detailed tool-specific toolbar at the top here, and then our file, edit, layout, these drop-down menus that are typical of most programs up here at the top as well. There's a couple other options up here. You can open up Adobe Bridge, some other Adobe products. We're not really going to be using this stuff whatsoever, so you won't have to worry about that. Up here also, you'll see there's this thing called Essentials here. This is specifying the type of workspace that I'm using. If I drop that down, you can see there's a couple different options. If your sort of workspace is looking different than mine, it's probably because you're not using Essentials. So you can click right here and click on that. You can also switch to some of these other ones and sort of see how that looks. But we're going to be working, Essentials is the best one, I believe, so you'll probably want to be working on there. Okay, so some of these tools here, we have sort of our selection tool here in black. We have the direct selection tool here, the cursor in white, and the direct selection is just going to allow us to select certain points on our lines, and a more detailed selection tool, whereas this black one is a general selection tool. We have this page tool, which we're not really going to be using. Most of these we aren't actually going to be using very much. We have the type tool. This is going to allow us to put in text. We have the line tool, which is of course to draw lines. The pen tool, similar to Photoshop, you can click points around and it spans a line between them. We also have the this smooth tool. If I right click again, like in Photoshop, you can see I have more options here. So like under smooth tool, I also have the pencil tool. Under the pen tool, I also have add anchor points, delete anchor points, and direction point tool. And I can tell that I have those because you can see there's this little black triangle at the bottom right side. And that indicates that there are more options in here. We have the rectangular frame tool, and this also has different frame options underneath it. And this is going to allow us to set up frames that we can then place information into. I personally don't use this very much, and you'll probably see why as I go over this, but you can definitely use this to start laying out your board. We also have an ellipse tool. This draws other shapes as well. If I right click on it, we have a rectangular option, polygon, stuff like that. The scissors tool, this allows us to snip lines, sort of like trim and split in Rhino. The scissor tool allows us to split lines apart and remove or add sections to it. Again, these we probably aren't really going to be using these too much. You might use this color theme tool, which is an eyedropper, and it picks out colors of whatever you select. So if I have a photo, for example, I could use this color theme tool, and it will sort of extract dominant colors in the image so that I can use those elsewhere in my layout, maybe for coloring text or line work or other diagrams, etc. You can see further down here under the zoom tool, we have a fill color. This is a little bit different than Photoshop. In InDesign and in Illustrator, we're dealing with vector lines, and those vector lines are going to have a fill. So if I draw, a square, I can fill the square with color. But the line work also has a color. So you can see here that's sort of this little box is indicating line weight color, whereas this guy here, this darkened box, filled box, is indicating the filled color. And if I right click over here, I can apply color, or I can use a gradient on the fill, or I can apply none, which means it's empty. So just to demonstrate, if I was to draw a box right now with the fill empty and the line weight black, you can see here the box has a black line weight, but no fill color. It's white on the inside, or empty. And if I double click over here on the fill color and I give it a color, you can see now our box has a blue fill color. So that's how that works. And we can see when we select our box here, you can see that blue color right here. So if I wanted to get rid of that, I can right click, apply none, and now it's empty again. So on that note, if I wanted to select things like Rhino, you can just drag a box left and right, doesn't matter, like it does in Rhino. So you can drag any way, or you can of course just select things directly like that. When you're working with lines and boxes, you can see up here our menu has changed. We have some options that we can work with. We can set the X and Y location of our box manually instead of moving it around by dragging it. So you can see under X and Y, as I move this box, those numbers will change. You can see that happening right now. the width and height is specifying the size of our box. So right now it's 11¼ by 11¼ inches, and I can manually change that over here by just punching in a different number. So if I type in 14, you can see it's changed the size of our box here. So now our box is 14 by 14. So sometimes that's nice if you're wanting a drawing or a render to be a very specific size. You can always manually set that here if you can't drag it. If I wanted to scale the box and change the width and height, of course I have these points here on the box that I can manually drag. You can see when I hover over them that my cursor changes to this arrow, so I can click and hold and drag that to scale the box to a different size. So you can see how that's working right now. And you can see also where my cursor is while I have it dragged down. It also gives you a little readout of the size of the box as well. So right now it's 23 inches by the height I am currently changing, so that number is changing. Also, if I hold shift while I'm scaling the box, you can see here that it will scale it uniformly. So if I undo that, so if I want to, scale this corner, if I don't have shift, I can sort of like freeform scale it. If I hold shift like in Rhino, it keeps it at a uniform scale, just like that. Some other things to note up here, again, up here you can see the line weight color and the fill color. Oftentimes you'll see that there are some redundancies in the tools. There's multiple ways to change things because those adjustment options happen more than once in your workspace. So this is an instance of that. We can change the colors here, or we can also change them down here on the left side of the screen. I can also change the stroke weight, excuse me. So the line weight of this box, right now it's set to 1 point. So just like Rhino, you can change the line weight here. Illustrator, you can do this as well, just in the very same way as we're doing here. If I just click this drop down menu, you can see that there are a number of options. I could also manually input a number. If I click on, let's say 10 point, now the line weight of the box is much bigger, so you can see that there. We can do a percentage scale, so just like I was dragging and holding shift here, we could also scale the object here as well. If we click this option here, you can see there's some different options for corners. We could do a beveled edge. You can see that there. These are just little stylistic things that you guys can explore and see what that is all about. So I'm going to delete this now. If I wanted to undo something, just like Rhino, Control-Z. One difference though is that if I needed to redo something after I've undone it, so let's say I undid, now I have these beveled corners, but I actually don't want those. I undid too much. I could go up to Edit and do Redo, Apply Attributes, so you can see that, and then Redo Clear, Undo. You can access Undo and Redo from here. You can also see it tells you what the hotkeys are here. So Control-Shift-Z is Redo. In Rhino it was just Control-Y, but here it's Control-Shift-Z. So just keep that in mind. Just like that. Under Edit, of course, we have some very typical options: cut, copy, paste, paste in place. This option is kind of nice if you have an object like this square, for example. If we have this square and we want to paste it on this same location on a different page, like this page, we can use that paste in place option. So I will do Edit, Copy, scroll down here to this page, and if I do Edit, Paste in Place, you'll see now it's pasted in the exact same location on this other page. So that's a pretty nice option. One thing also that's really awesome in here in design is when you start placing stuff, and we'll get into this, there's this edit with option. So for example, if I have, let's say I place this render in here. If I wanted to edit this render, even though I've placed it in here, I can select the render, I can go up here to edit and do edit with, and you can see that there are some other options here. I can edit it in Rhino, in which case it will open this render up in Rhino for me to edit. I can edit with Photoshop, I can edit with InDesign, Illustrator, and if I click one of these, it's just going to open up that software right away. So I'll show how that works a little bit later on here. Right, so yeah, some of these options we're really not going to be going over a whole lot. You can explore these options and learn what they are on the internet if you need to use them, like if you need to place filler text. Under objects, we have the typical like transform options, move scale, rotate. This option shear, which lets you skew things at a diagonal, stuff like that. You might need some fitting options. Also, a lot of this stuff we can access just by right-clicking on objects in InDesign. So I'll go over some of that stuff as we need to go over it. If you're missing toolbars, you always want to check under Window here. You can see the toolbars that I am using are checked. Under Workspace, you can see the Essentials is checked. It also tells me over here I'm using the Essentials workspace. So if you're missing a window, if you're missing some toolbars, always come here to Window. You'll probably find it, and if you don't have it and you need it, you can just click on it and it will pop up right there. So these windows also are over here on the right side. That's where they're going to pop up. And this is the last thing that I'm going to go over in this tutorial is sort of what these windows are. Again, there are some redundancies. So like we have stroke weight here. If I again have like a square and I select the square, I can change the stroke from here. But I don't have as many options as I do over here. Under the stroke window, I can change the line weight, I can change the cap, so I might have a rounded end or a squared end. I can change the corners, if they're sharp corners, if they're rounded corners. So this is like a rounded corner. This would be a sharp corner. You can have a beveled corner. You can change the alignment of the stroke. So right now it's aligned in the center. You can see because that blue line. If I select these other options, you can see now the stroke weight is on the inside of that blue line, and in this option it's on the outside. So typically you want to have it in the center, but it's up to you. The type of line, there are various different line weights: dashed lines, dotted lines, double and triple lines, etc. Start and end under here, we'll talk about this more in annotations, but you can change the what the start and the end of the line look like. So if you want arrows, a circled end, etc. Self-explanatory. You can change the scale of those ends as well, which we'll talk about this stuff more later. But again, we can also change the color, the line weight color and the fill color of our object from here, the color window as well as up here, as well as on the left side. So again, there's a lot of ways to do a number of things in here. We have this thing called swatches, which are just, it's like a color palette. You can also import color palettes from Adobe CC libraries. So You can see here I have a series of different color palettes. I usually use these for diagrams, and I've put them here in InDesign for me to use on my InDesign boards as well. So these are probably the most crucial ones, these three at the top here. Again, if you don't have these, just go over to Window and then click on them and they'll pop up. First we have pages, so this shows all of the pages here in InDesign, our 4 pages. If I double click on these, it will go to each page. So we're on page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. So you can see if you double click on those that it jumps right to them. You also have this thing called a master page, and a master page is, you can notice I'm on the master page now because there's only one page when I zoom out compared to this. A master page lets you set up certain things. Maybe you have a drawing or an icon or a page number or something that's the same on every single page. In that case, it's something that you'd want to set up on the master page, which will then apply that to all of the pages. So for example, if I have a page number here, say I have this number 2, that's going to be on every single page or something like that. Right there in the corner. So if I have this number 2, that's going to be on every single page. So I'll put it on the master page. And now you can see if I come to these other pages, you can see that number 2 is on every single one of these pages, right? You can see that. There it is. And it's because I've put it on the master page. So for example, again, if I put that render in here, now if I go to all of our pages, it's on every single page, and all I did was place it one time. You'll also notice that I can't select that either. I can't select the number and I can't select the render, but I can if I'm on the master page. If I double click on the master page here, I can select them from here. So if I needed to change these numbers, all I need to do is right click on the page that I want to change. So if I want this to be number 1 because it's the first page, I'm just going to right click on our page 1 here and it brings up this menu. You can see there's a series of options. You have like insert pages, you can move pages, duplicate things. You can apply the master to the page if it's not for some reason, but what we're looking for is this override all master page items. So that's going to allow me to select these things and change them. So if I click that, now you can see I can select these only on this page, only on page number 1, because that's what I had selected. So now I can change this to a 1. Maybe on this page I'll actually want this over here. So you can see how that works. Really this just comes in handy, like you're going to use the master page maybe to make some basic placement things, like if you know you're going to have a render in one location on every page, or like I said, this page number thing, or if you have text in the same location on every page, you're going to set that up in the master page. It's going to apply it to all of your pages, and then when you want to change the text or change the render or something, all you're going to do is right click on the page and you're just going to click override all master page items, and then it will allow you to change those things. Right. So that's the pages. Here under layer or under layers, layers are not the same in InDesign as they are in Photoshop. They're not as important. Really they're just an organizing tool here, so sort of like Rhino. what you're probably going to want to do is have a series of layers. You know, under layer 1, this might be our images layer, and then we might have a drawings layer. We might also have an annotations or text layer. So sort of like this, that sort of stack of papers idea comes into play here. If I have text on this annotations layer, it's going to be above everything right now, but if I move that layer below the images layer and place it at the bottom, everything is going to show up on top. So for example, if I have some text here, text, and let's say, you know, I move this render and now we can't see the text anymore, and that's because it's behind our rendered image. So if I move the annotations layer above images, you can see now it says text right there. So keep that in mind. Also, if I right click and I go here to, let's see, well, yeah, we can transform things, flip them. We can edit the fitting. So there's a lot of options here, copy and paste. Yes. So when you right click on things, there are more options available. The other window over here that we're going to be looking at a lot is this thing called links. And you need to pay attention to that only because in InDesign we're placing things, we're linking in information. We're not actually putting any raw files into InDesign. They're just taking the information from somewhere else on your computer and transferring it into the InDesign file. So, and we'll talk about that later when we start setting things up, but you can see here that that render that I have in the InDesign file, this one here, is a link, and it's shown here under the links window. If there's an issue like you moved your file and now InDesign doesn't know where it is, it's probably going to have this little hazard logo there, a yellow triangle with an exclamation mark. If that's the case, you can right click on your link. You can relink things. You can go to where the link is in your file directory. You can edit the links. You can, again, edit the link with different Adobe software, different softwares in general, stuff like that. So really handy. You're probably going to be using this frequently with your portfolio as you update drawings and renders and stuff. You're going to be relinking and editing the links from this links window. Yep, so that is basically it for the introduction. Again, a lot of this stuff, this was just a brief overview. A lot of this stuff I'm going to go into more depth when we start placing information onto the boards and showing you guys how to lay a board out or lay a portfolio out and stuff like that. So that's going to wrap it up for this guy.